Good morning. Last Friday, a special grand jury in Summit County indicted former First Energy executives Chuck Jones and Michael Dowling, as well as Sam Randazzo, the former chairman of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, with a combined 27 counts of felony violations, including engaging in a corrupt activity, all related to their joint enterprise to hijack Ohio's regulatory structure for the benefit of First Energy Corporation and for themselves. Call it the Jones racket. Arrest warrants were issued Friday, and over the weekend, the counsel representing these men were in contact with our office and assured us that they would turn themselves in this morning at 8:30 a.m. at the Summit County Jail. They did not fulfill that promise, and I suppose I am unsurprised that they would not keep this promise either. The warrants remain active, and we anticipate that they will be taken into custody today. We'll provide further details about this indictment in just a few moments. But to begin with, some background is in order because the indictment is a result of an unusual process that many of you may not find to be familiar. I do urge you to listen carefully because we will not be taking questions at the end of this briefing. Chapter 177 of the Ohio Revised Code establishes the Ohio Organized Crime Investigations Commission, or OOCIC, a 7-member bipartisan group made up of local sheriffs, chiefs of police, and local prosecutors, led by the Ohio Attorney General. In keeping with Ohio's wise tradition of local law enforcement, the authority of the commission cannot be exercised by the Attorney General without the consent of the commission. The OOCIC has a very small permanent staff. When the commission finds a basis to open an investigation, they form a task force that is made up significantly of local law enforcement, as well as some attorney general staff. Like all Ohioans, I was appalled by the revelations that came out in July of 2020 when the United States Department of Justice brought the first indictments on Larry Householder and others. The 5 men at the core of that scandal were indicted, and 4 of them that were still living were convicted in federal court in the case brought by the U.S. DOJ. I applaud the work that was done by the United States Attorney General through United States Attorney David DeVillers, current United States Attorney Kenneth Parker, and his assistants Emily Gladfelder and Matt Singer, who prepared and tried an excellent case. Since that 2023 trial, Sam Randazzo has been indicted as well on federal charges. The first energy executives who perverted the purposes and internal controls of their corporation in pursuit of power and money have not yet been charged prior to these indictments that we're announcing today. A little bit of background. During the second half of 2022, I began to become concerned about the passage of time. The Ohio statute of limitations on felonies is generally 6 years, and many of the events that occurred in 2018 would run out in 2024, hit the time limit. Another concern was the possibility of a successful appeal. Should the federal case be overturned on appeal, there's no guarantee that these public officials that were involved could not return to government service, a concern I heard repeatedly from legislators. But Ohio law for certain offenses includes a bar on future public service or positions of trust after conviction. State law could accomplish what federal law could not: make certain that there would not be any comeback kids. About a year ago, I detailed my second in command for law enforcement, Carol O'Brien, to begin exploring legal theories based on publicly available information. She concluded that a state prosecution was warranted and that if it was to occur, an investigation would need to be commenced immediately. On April 23rd of last year, the Organized Crime Investigations Commission authorized a task force to do exactly that. Carol and her team, some of whom you will hear from, have worked full-time on this project ever since. Friday's indictment is the first outcome of their long and diligent labor. I'm particularly indebted to Summit County Prosecutor Sherry Bevan Walsh and Summit County Sheriff Candy Thothery, without whom this task force could not have existed, and without whom this investigation would not have occurred and these wrongdoers would not have been indicted. Both are courageous leaders, career law enforcement. Their lifetime of experience was evident throughout this investigation. I also want to thank the investigators and analysts at our office's Bureau of Criminal Investigation who supported this investigation. Their work, as usual, was thorough and professional. We also received an important investigative assist from the Ohio Ethics Commission and its executive director, Paul Nick. I also want to extend my thanks to the new leadership of First Energy, which has cooperated fulsomely in our investigation. They're now led by a new board and new executives. They've undertaken an expansive internal reform effort and used outside resources to validate its efficacy. In a moment, Carol O'Brien, a career prosecutor and former elected prosecuting attorney, will walk you through this indictment and explain the counts. Before I turn the podium over to her, I would like to offer a few observations. First, this indictment is about way more than one piece of legislation. It is about the hostile capture of a significant portion of Ohio's state government by deception, betrayal, and dishonesty. Much has been said about the householder enterprise and the legislative corruption that produced House Bill 6, corruption, incidentally, that my office ended through its civil lawsuit that stopped the nuclear bailout and ended the guaranteed profit provisions known as decoupling. We saved the taxpayers well over $1 billion. But this indictment is about the Jones racket, in which Larry Householder was just one agent. Among other things, Sam Randazzo is charged with failing to register as a lobbyist at the same time he was serving as the chairman of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. The evidence of trial will show that he used his awesome power as chairman to actively subvert Ohio's regulation of First Energy. He was covered with First Energy pocket lint. He was paid by the taxpayers and was supposed to work for you. But instead, he worked for them as their agent, their lobbyist, their ally. And public corruption properly focuses on public officials like Randazzo. In Lincoln's words, each public official registers an oath in heaven to uphold the law. Public corruption is a deliberate violation of that oath. Severe legal consequences and public loathing are the just outcomes of such betrayal. But what of those who fund the corruption? First Energy's cash and the influence it bought were the jet fuel that propelled the Jones racket and its engine of corruption. Their actions over a period of years have undermined confidence in state government, the rule of law. It very nearly made them even richer men than they already are. First Energy executives Chuck Jones and Michael Dowling, for the first time, will be held to answer for their corrupt acts. There can be no justice without holding the check writers and the masterminds accountable. In May 2019, as he was secretly running his public corruption racket, Chuck Jones told a shareholder meeting, "I've been with First Energy for more than 40 years, and I'm certain that 2018 was one of the most pivotal and productive in our company's history." He was correct, but not for the reasons his audience assumed. Finally, our law teaches that, among other things, the overriding purposes of felony sentencing include punishing the offender and protecting the public from future offenses by the offender or others. These indictments and the criminal convictions that I'm confident they will produce are important for this broader reason: the others. Power is inherently seductive and corrosive. It attracts advantage seekers and their money as surely as flies swarm a carcass in a sweltering sun. Shout it from the public square to the boardroom, from Wall Street to Broad and High. Those who perversely seek to turn the government to their private ends will face the destruction of everything that they were working for. The task force continues its work. The grand jury remains impaneled and subject to recall. For that reason, we will not be accepting any questions today. Now I will return this over to Deputy Attorney General for Law Enforcement, Carol O'Brien, to walk you through the details and the substance of these indictments. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to start here by thanking the public officials without whom's assistance we could not have been here today. Thank you, General Yost, for your continued support of the Ohio Organized Crime Investigations Commission, and in particular, providing the resources that enabled our team to fully investigate and fully present this case to the grand jury. Thank you, Prosecutor Walsh and Sheriff Fothery, for the continued support and contribution of resources and of personnel and time. I want to especially thank the dedicated members of the task force, our two assistant attorneys, our two assistant prosecutors, Summit County Chief Counsel Brad Gessner and Principal Assistant Attorney General Matt Meyer, who have worked diligently and, believe me, tirelessly on this case. Summit County Sheriff's Deputy or Lieutenant Carla Bloomingdale, our BCI agents, analysts, and accountant, and last but not least, our paralegal who has selflessly given of her time. There are 5 defendants named in this case, in this indictment. Sam Randazzo was a longtime Columbus attorney who practiced mainly in the energy industry. He had one major client, one major legitimate client, a trade organization comprised of large industrial energy users called IEU Ohio. Members of IEU were companies akin to Timken Steel, the University of Akron, very, very large energy users. Sustainability Funding Alliance of Ohio and IEU Ohio Administration Company, LLC, are also named in this indictment. They are sham companies who had no employees and no clients. They were merely pass-through companies where all income from their activities went back to Sam Randazzo. Charles E. Chuck Jones is the former CEO of First Energy until he was separated or terminated in 2020. He was instrumental in the theft of $4.3 million from First Energy and its shareholders, and the payment of the money to Sam Randazzo in exchange for favorable PUCO actions. Michael Dowling was the Senior Vice President of External Affairs for First Energy and was a key architect of the long-term payments to Sam Randazzo for work done for First Energy and the $4.3 million bribe paid to Sam Randazzo in return for favors. The defendants, as more fully stated in the indictment, constituted a criminal enterprise as defined by Revised Code 2923.31. The enterprise consisted of the individuals mentioned above, as well as the legitimate company First Energy, in addition to the illegitimate companies SFA and Industrial Energy Users Ohio Admin. Sam Randazzo was not the only person who benefited from the conduct found in the enterprise. The defendants, Chuck Jones and Mike Dowling, benefited significantly, and through this organized series of crimes, arranged for First Energy to benefit. While First Energy was benefiting from House Bill 6, First Energy was also a victim of the consistent thefts that was occurring as a result of the defendant's actions. I'm going to focus my comments on the indictment and the stories behind the indictment. We have provided you with what is called a speaking indictment. The indictment tells a story that could be the basis for a fiction novel. Unfortunately for all of us in Ohio, the facts of this case tell the true story of greed and corruption by 3 men and 2 sham organizations. One man, the attorney, bound by both the laws of the state of Ohio and the ethical constraints required in law, and 2 high-ranking officials of a publicly traded company who were expected to act lawfully and ethically in the best interest of their shareholders and their employees. That didn't happen. In 1997, Sam Randazzo formed the trade organization Industrial Energy Users Ohio. The members of this organization were the industrial and commercial companies who consume large amounts of energy. Steel companies, universities, smelters, anyone who used large amounts of energy were allowed to become members. The purpose of the organization was to help these companies join their voice to gain adequate representation. Sam Randazzo was the general counsel of IEU Ohio and was expected to act in the organization's best interest. In 2009, Sam Randazzo filed the Articles of Incorporation for Sustainability Funding Alliance of Ohio. At about the same time, he also filed Articles of Incorporation for IEU Ohio Admin Company, LLC, a company with a very similar name to IEU Ohio. Sam Randazzo, utilizing his sham companies, entered into a large-scale covert operation with First Energy that lasted over a decade. CEO Charles Jones and Senior Vice President of External Affairs Michael Dowling worked with Mr. Randazzo to subvert state government in ways that mightily enriched themselves. Samuel Randazzo has been indicted on 4 counts of theft, money laundering counts, telecommunications fraud counts, 6 counts of tampering with records, and bribery, in where he solicited and or accepted anything of value, in this case money, to corrupt or improperly influence him with respect to the discharge of his duties. Each of the crimes I've mentioned is a crime that serves as a basis for the charge of engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity, more colloquially known as RICO. Mr. Jones and Mr. Dowling have been indicted for bribery, paying Sam Randazzo $4.3 million in 2019 to influence him with respect to the discharge of his duties while serving on the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. Mr. Randazzo lobbied on behalf of First Energy and took actions that resulted in benefits for First Energy during the course of his tenure at the PUCO. The grand jury also returned indictments against Mr. Jones and Dowling for counts of telecommunication fraud, money laundering, and theft. Mr. Dowling was also indicted on 2 counts of tampering with records. These crimes also serve as predicates for the RICO charge. Mr. Randazzo's sham companies, SFA and Industrial Energy Users Ohio Admin, were utilized to shield First Energy's payments to Sam Randazzo, as well as to cloud the distribution of settlements belonging to Mr. Randazzo's legitimate client. SFAO had no employees and was solely owned and operated by Sam Randazzo. IEU Ohio Admin was a shell company with a name that was so close to his client's name as to be confusing, most likely deliberately so. Sam Randazzo directed First Energy to deposit money paid to him into these accounts, again to hide the fact that he was receiving money from First Energy. Again, all of the income that went into these accounts was funneled to Sam Randazzo. Mr. Randazzo's thefts were engineered utilizing two separate schemes, at the very least. As general counsel for IEU Ohio, Mr. Randazzo kept tight control of the purse strings. He literally controlled every bank account held in his client's name, and he controlled every dollar that ran through those accounts. Since 1997, the members of the legitimate company, IEU Ohio, relied almost exclusively on Mr. Randazzo to represent them in actions in which they were adverse to First Energy. Unfortunately for the unsuspecting and trusting clients, Mr. Randazzo had been covertly working for and with First Energy since at least 2010 and receiving tens of millions of dollars through January 2nd, 2019. At no time did Mr. Randazzo notify his true clients that he was a consultant First Energy, a lobbyist First Energy, or helping First Energy, a party that was adverse to their own best interest. When Mr. Randazzo negotiated a settlement on behalf of his legitimate client, IEU Ohio, the payments were made to SFA instead of the client or to the law firm that employed Mr. Randazzo. Each member of IEU Ohio was to receive settlement monies that were based on a formula. Because Mr. Randazzo had a strict rule that no other member could know what each member was paid, there was no way for the legitimate clients or members of the organization to know if they were being compensated correctly. They could know the total of the settlement that IEU Ohio was to receive, but not how the settlement was paid out to members. The lack of transparency enabled Mr. Randazzo to steal from his clients with little chance of being caught. The first method was the skim. Mr. Randazzo would negotiate a settlement, and instead of making the payment to the client, the payment would be made to the sham organization SFA. Before forwarding the money on to IEU Ohio and its members, Mr. Randazzo skimmed money from the top and then forwarded the rest to the client. The second method was to insert an anonymous IEU Ohio member into the mix of people getting a settlement amount. Once the settlement was received by IEU Ohio, the legitimate company, he would then personally direct payments to Sustainability Funding Alliance. The members of IEU Ohio had no idea that the anonymous member was their trusted general counsel, Sam Randazzo. Mr. Randazzo used this scheme in addition to other times to steal over $1 million, and he put it into his personal Charles Schwab retirement account. These schemes would not have been possible had Mr. Jones and Mr. Dowling not worked in concert with Mr. Randazzo, concealing payments to Mr. Randazzo by paying the sham companies millions of dollars for little or no work. Mr. Randazzo filed dozens of actions against energy companies, but not against First Energy. The ultimate betrayal to his legitimate clients and frankly to the citizens of the state of Ohio was the First Energy payment of $4.3 million to Sam Randazzo as he was angling for an appointment to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. The money was paid for a purpose, to influence Mr. Randazzo in the exercise of his duties as chair of the PUCO. Mr. Randazzo is also charged with numerous counts of tampering with records. He served on the nominating council for the PUCO for close to a decade before he was appointed to the commission and became chair. As a member of the nominating council, and when he became chair, Mr. Randazzo was required to file the annual Ohio Ethics Commission financial disclosure forms. Noticeably absent from each and every annual disclosure was the income earned from First Energy. And more surprising was the total absence of the $4.3 million payment on January 2nd, 2019 as income, either as a pass-through for one of the sham companies or from First Energy. Additionally, in stunning testimony given to the Ohio House of Representatives Select Committee on Energy Policy and Oversight, Mr. Randazzo, for the record, denied ever representing as a lawyer or as a lobbyist any electric utility regulated by the PUCO or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The evidence will show that First Energy Corp. And/or its subsidiaries and affiliates had paid Mr. Randazzo to lobby both legislative and executive branch officials. As the Attorney General said, there is a tremendous amount of information contained in the indictment. Our task force will continue to work towards justice, continuing to investigate and prosecute the state law claims that have been indicted and that may come up in the future. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Candy Fothery, and I'm the Sheriff of Summit County. My office has spent nearly a year working diligently on this investigation in partnership with the Summit County Prosecutor's Office, the Ohio Attorney General's Office, and the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The crimes committed by these individuals impacted the pocketbooks of every hard-working Ohioan and further shook our faith in the institutions and organizations that we count on to represent us and to provide us with essential services. Today, we take another important step in ensuring that justice is served for these crimes and that those who took advantage of the public's trust are held accountable. I am proud of my team and all of those involved in this investigation. Today is a good day for Ohio.
Good morning. I'm L.A. Kolkovich, and I'm an assistant prosecutor for the Summit County Prosecutor's Office. On behalf of Prosecutor Walsh, I want to thank General Yost and his staff for all their work indicting this case. I also want to thank Summit County Sheriff Candy Fothery and her deputies for their assistance. It has been nearly 4 years since investigators discovered this massive bribery scheme. This indictment is another step to bring justice for the residents of Summit County and Ohio. These individuals use First Energy to break the law and betray the public trust. We will never stop fighting to prosecute each and every individual involved in this scheme on behalf of every citizen and First Energy customer in Summit County and Ohio. We appreciate the ability to work jointly with Attorney General Yost and the Ohio Organized Crime Commission. This collaboration between state and county law enforcement is an example of government doing its best to fight crime and corruption in not only Summit County, but throughout the state of Ohio.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. We will be issuing a press release that will have the indictment included. Thank you.